Right, well, welcome. Welcome to Amplify Women in Research. I have my second guest here, Dr. Audrey Hicks. Dr. Hicks is a professor in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster University. Her PhD is in medical sciences in neuromuscular physiology. She has over 100 peer-reviewed publications and her H-index is 55. Importantly, she has played leadership roles in the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines for all age groups, including adults with spinal cord injury and those with multiple sclerosis. She is the founding director of the MAC Wheelers and the MS Fit exercise programs at McMaster University. And she was past president of the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, where she's also received a number of awards. In 2020, Dr. Hicks was named the Hamilton Woman of Distinction in the health category. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Hicks. It's so impressive to see the recognitions and awards, and I'm sure you must look on it too and be so proud of everything that you've accomplished. Where did this all start? So your expertise are in exercise rehabilitation and you work with special populations. How did it all begin on your end?
Well, honestly, I really would credit my master's thesis supervisor as kind of starting me off on this journey. I decided to do a master's when I finished my undergraduate degree in physical education, simply because I had no idea what I wanted to do with the degree. So I thought I would stay in school because that seemed the easier option. And Duncan McDougall was my master's supervisor. And Duncan sadly passed away last year, but he was an internationally renowned exercise physiologist, a real integrative physiologist. And doing my master's with him is really, I think, what started it. I really enjoyed the research environment. I loved the fact that, you know, everything was new and that you were doing something different. And I was intrigued by the subject area. So yeah, I would say it was falling into a master's degree because I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I graduated. And that's sort of what started it.
It's kind of funny when you talk to people in research how they were like, well, I didn't know what else to do, so I kind of went the research route to see what it offered, and then you do fall in love with it then. Because I don't think you, like, as an undergraduate student, people realize how much you learn and how much you get to do in research, right?
Oh, I've had so many students say, so how did you do career? And I go, oh my gosh, like just by accident.
Yeah.
It was totally accidental fortune. Yeah.
And was it in the populations that you work with currently?
Oh, absolutely not. And again,
okay,
that's kind of an interesting story and probably an interesting lesson. When I first started out, I was doing more basic exercise physiology research, muscle fatigue research, in particular once I got my position at McMaster. And it wasn't until I got denied a renewal of my NSERC application, so I was unsuccessful in an NSERC renewal, that it got me to change trajectory. And it was, again, it's one of those serendipitous things that happens in life. In this grant application, I had used a model of paralyzed muscle to try to investigate what was happening to the sodium potassium ATPase pump, which is a key pump of muscle excitability. And that was sort of where my expertise was from my PhD. And I had done some work on researching while I was preparing the grant application to look at paralyzed muscle as a model where the pump would have been down-regulated. And I was, you know, thinking of how we might understand more about the pump if we kind of could see it in a muscle that wasn't active all the time versus muscles that were active. And then the grant didn't get funded. And, you know, after you lick your wounds in those experiences, I realized that I really had been quite fascinated by researching the paralyzed muscle. So that got me all into spinal cord injury research then. And that launched my career into something that I think is far more rewarding than it would have been if I stayed in the basic science. Like, I love basic science, but I absolutely, truly love impacting the lives of people that I've met over the last 25 years in doing research in special populations.
Yeah, you get that human connection from that kind of research. And it's exciting to see too that you've done so much for things like guidelines, where you get to take that research and then really impact more and more people beyond your own lab. So yeah. And so when you look back at some of that work, what is sort of the most impactful or the most cited? Then maybe those are two separate things actually. What projects or what papers do you look back and think, oh, those are the big ones?
Okay, so well, obviously the guidelines papers, when I was president of CSEP, that's right when we were rolling out the new guidelines. And so sure, the new Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines paper, that's probably the most cited paper. I'm a co-author on it. I think it has over 1,000 citations. And sure, that there's pride in having that paper. But I think when I look at a first author paper that I was really proud of the citations is probably the first randomized control trial that I did in people with spinal cord injury after I kind of changed my research trajectory and had to change my funders. So I got funding from the Rick Hansen Foundation and did a randomized control trial on exercise training in people with spinal cord injury. And that paper has been cited over 500 times, and I find that really remarkable just because of the special population involved. There's a lot of people doing spinal cord injury research, specifically with respect to exercise. So I think I'm probably most proud of that one.
Yeah, it's hard when you're in such a specialized area, right? To get your citations up. So it's nice to see when those papers take off.
Mm-hmm.
Are there papers that you thought, oh, this is going to be the one, like this is going to be the project that sort of makes my mark, that didn't quite fare as well as you hoped?
Absolutely. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
The ones that you think are going to be slam dunks never are. But actually, again, there was one paper that we published back in probably around 2004. And it was a paper that came out of a study that we had done utilizing body weight supported treadmill training in people with spinal cord injury. And our primary outcomes for that study were related to walking ability, because that's when those treadmills were really coming about, and Christopher Reeve was still, had really started that kind of movement to using body weight support treadmill to try to improve walking function in people with spinal cord injury. But one of the side papers to come out of it in our particular study that lasted we had people training for over 6 months on these treadmills 3 times a week. We did muscle biopsies. And this one paper was looking at muscle phenotype in people with paralyzed lower legs. And we saw these remarkable changes in muscle phenotype, because after spinal cord injury and paralysis, your fiber type switches to a more fast twitch, fast fatigable fiber type, which isn't very conducive to maintaining regular contractions. And we saw that the people, after they'd been training for 6 months on the treadmill 3 times a week, that their phenotypes were switching back to having a greater representation of type 1 fibers and not as many of the type 2X. And I thought that was amazing. Because first of all, there was no electrical stim going on the muscle. So it was just the manual trainers moving their limbs, but they were obviously getting reflex activity from the walking. But that type of activation was enough to induce this type of plasticity. I thought that was hugely important. Yeah. And nobody else has done it. Really, since then, even in the paper came out in 2004, it hasn't been repeated, but it's only been cited about 110 times or something. So I've been kind of surprised, and I don't know, you always then second guess how you phrase the title,
yeah,
those kinds of things, because I thought that paper would be more impactful, and maybe it'll be a slow developer.
Yeah, it is funny. You start to realize how important those titles really are. It makes such a difference. It's kind of like, well, now we talk about clickbait news, but we need clickbait titles for our research papers as well, right? But that's a good lesson, actually, is to really think about the title of the paper when you're publishing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Again, so when you look back on everything that you've done, you sort of mentioned you've got the research side and then the side where you're sort of working with the populations. What would you say your greatest contribution so far has been to the field?
Um, well, I think I'm probably most proud of the work that I've done on exercise rehabilitation in either people with spinal cord injury or people living with multiple sclerosis. Those are the excuse me, the two neurological populations I focused on. And you know, apart from the predicted improvements in fitness that you would expect, any exercise physiologist knows it if you exercise train. But it's been their improvements in quality of life, ability to do their ADLs, like just their sense of well-being. Those kinds of things I think have been really impactful. And I think what I'm also quite proud of is that when I finished these RCTs in these two populations showing the benefits of exercise, we were then able to launch community-based exercise programs for those special populations right in our facility. We're very fortunate at McMaster to have this large facility that's dedicated for special populations. And so we've got these community-based programs that I've got over 100 members with spinal cord injury and multiple sclerosis that come twice a week, and they get individualized exercise programming based on the guidelines, and they get to interact with undergraduate students. So I really like that translation of the research that's been able to happen. I find that very rewarding.
Yeah, it's great. I remember that from my PhD work as well. You finish the intervention and on your end, you think, well, all I've done is give them some exercise. And the way they talk about it is so much more than that, right? Like you've changed their lives in some ways that you never thought. Like you just thought you were going to get them fitter and healthier, but there's so much more to it, right? So it is very rewarding to see.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I'd like to wrap up with sort of your thoughts or your words for other women in research out there who are starting off or need some endurance to keep them going. Any thoughts or words for that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important for any woman in science because, you know, like lives take different trajectories and your family life takes different trajectories, that you have to accept the valleys as well as the hills, you know, so it's going to go up and down for sure. I think another message that I always try to tell my female students is that to try to turn every obstacle into just an opportunity to do something differently. And I always use my example of not getting my NSIC renewed as kind of really launching or changing my career for the better, for sure. So not try to take all the rejections, which are inherent in what we do,
Yeah,
personally, but to take them as opportunities to do something differently.
yeah. There's a lot of perseverance required in academia, isn't there? You have to pick yourself up every time you get a rejection and keep going. But I think that's a great story that you have. I didn't know about that. It's very interesting to hear that that change in career, because it's true. Like it forces you to rethink what's meaningful and what's going to keep you going as well, right?
You have to be practical. You need to be productive in what we do. But yes, there's sometimes with the failure comes something even better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and forward to seeing you when we get to go to conferences again sometime in the
I
future.
wonder if that'll happen soon.
Post COVID, whenever that happens exactly. Thank you so much.